All right, I think we're ready to get started here. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm joined up here on stage with two CEOs whose companies leverage big data, the Internet of Things, machine learning, and AI. If that's enough buzzwords to describe a company or two. Starting with Peter, why don't you give us a short explanation of what your business, FatBrain, does, and then we'll move on to John, talk a little bit about HiSolutions.
Well, so much hoopla has been made about AI. I don't have to tell you what AI is, but we're an AI solutions company. But what is special about us is that we focus on what we call the middle of the pyramid. That is businesses that actually drive the majority of the global economy. Businesses that are not Fortune 500 and that are not just a single consumer playing on their favorite application, but businesses that are 500 folks or less, sometimes just one or two people, who are really important to the next generation of what's going to make the future thrive for them and really for us. And we think so much time by folks like governments and Fortune 500s are spent with McKinsey and other consulting firms to figure out how to extract value from big data and analytics and all those kind of insights. With a deluge of data, we follow the thesis that smart and many beats large and heavy. So smart and many means, in really practical terms, something you all experience with the Waze navigation system. Raise your hand if you ever used Waze. Right? And what's magical about Waze is the fact that by just putting a little bit of information in, you know more about what's going on in terms of traffic than any single largest company in the world, whether it's UPS or FedEx or anybody else who's involved in transportation, including all the federal government folks. So the same kind of concepts apply to AI and learning from each other what can drive value from data. So that's a little bit about us, and more to come.
John?
So I've known Peter for a long time. He's always been on the front edge of technology. So his company actually makes technology. Our company leverages technology. So what we do is we're creating a national footprint in the smart home automation business. So smart home automation, think automated shades, lighting, networks, home theaters, audio, video, monitoring, security. And there's no national brand in this country, and there really isn't any company of scale. And so we're building a company of scale, and we're doing it through acquisitions throughout the country. And then we roll these companies into one company, and we adopt best practices and turn those companies into bigger versions of themselves. And in that effort in creating this company, we have the opportunity to create a number of new service lines and applications that don't exist today. And as we'll talk further, we expect to leverage AI and machine learning to create whole new categories of services and applications.
Great. And one note, let's just hold the mic really close for our live stream. Make sure we pick up all the audio. So again, I'll go back to Peter and then we'll move on to John. But when did you first start working in the AI space, as broad as that sounds, and how much has it evolved since you first got going?
That's a true story. I was a little boy, and I learned. I read a book by a science fiction writer whose name was Isaac Asimov, and the science fiction story, was all about not quite AI, but it was about a professor who was what we know today doing kind of telepresence. His brain and his mind was in one place, and his body and everything else was in another place, literally like oceans removed. And that just fascinated. How could this be possible? What an amazing thing. Fast forward to when I was in university, went to University of Maryland, Terps. I worked for a company called Martin Marietta, and we had just won a large contract to do navigation kind of systems for MX missiles. Well, we had AI labs. This is 1983. I'm old, by the way. So, and it was an amazing thing. Now, mind you, literally tens of millions of dollars of equipment that we had in our AI labs probably was dwarfed by anything you have by 100th in your iPhone today. So the thinking was there, all the ideas were there in terms of what we could do, but the hardware wasn't there, the sophistication wasn't there. Fast forward to just only 5-6 years ago, we built a business that Cisco ended up buying called Observable Networks, that really was before its time, and today it serves all of Cisco's kind of value-added cybersecurity services under the Secure brand. But it really looked at how people were behaving on a network. And what I mean specifically is, imagine that a printer in CFO's office for a very large pharma company, Monsanto, shouldn't be actually sending a very large file to Vietnam, where none of the Monsanto offices are present in Vietnam. There's probably something wrong going on with that, and you would never know it until you were observing something like this. So all of these things kind of were the precursor, so to speak, to the kind of things that are possible today, the kind of things that you know today from ChatGPT and otherwise. But they are possible today because how sophisticated the compute has gotten, how sophisticated our thinking has gotten. One of the earlier panelists said today that sometimes seeing is believing. So a few years ago, if I told you something about AI, you would say, I'm not quite sure what it means, but now that most of you have experienced in some form what it can do for you, you believe that it can help you. And we think it's a huge thing, going back all the way to when I was a kid to a few years back at Martin Marietta, and bringing us here today, which I think is going to impact all of us in a tremendous transformational way. So very exciting all around for that.
I think 1983 qualifies as before it was cool. I don't know if John, I don't know if you can top that one, John. That was before my time. So
yeah, Peter never ceases to amaze me. I remember hearing about your early days in Martin Marietta. Amazing. I'm way more of a newbie to the AI and machine learning world. But it scares me when I hear people talking about regulating this technology, because I mean, governments can't regulate anything well, right? So this is setting up for a disaster. But your mind starts to really race about the kinds of again, applications and services that can be created around the data that you get from AI and machine learning, and we're just beginning to scratch the surface of that in our business. I'm excited about where it's going to go, but one thing that we've done is we're now able to really observe a homeowner's network and understand what's working or not working in their homes, so that when they come home, when they need to get on a Zoom for an important business meeting and the network's not working, they know about it in advance, and in fact we can fix it in advance even before they know it's not working. So there are all kinds of personalization applications and services that we'll bring to the market over the coming years, and it's tremendously exciting.
great. So the public has become exponentially more aware of AI even since November 30th, the day that ChatGPT came out. It's the fastest adopted piece of software in history. Reached 100 million users in 2 months. Compare that to the second fastest is TikTok. It took 5 times longer. The third fastest is Instagram. It took 15 times longer. And all of a sudden, it's at the forefront of everyone's minds, not just people who have been working on it for decades. And along with ChatGPT comes there's been a proliferation of consumer tools that are built on top of or in conjunction with OpenAI's ChatGPT. But I'll start with you, Peter, here. I want to talk a little bit more about AI tools for the enterprise rather than specifically on the consumer side. So what are some enterprise level use cases in which AI has the most impact?
I'm gonna maybe do a little bit of a historical excursion, and I'll bring it back to the question. The 90s, again, I'm old, so I like having kind of decades of reference, not just when my kids all went to college and were in school and so on, but just kind of when economy thrived. In the 90s, economy thrived, and one of the key reasons, if you study why that happened, was tremendous increase, really burst in productivity, brought about by automation. right? And this is when automation really improved. Folks got enterprise resource management systems and software flourished and so on and so on. Well, this same kind of wave of productivity increase is what we think is going to drive kind of the next generation of growth. And very specifically, we think it's going to help many of us work better and be more productive. That is not a flavor of, oh, we're going to be replaced by the machines. It's more the flavor of we're going to be enhanced and boosted. Our creativity and otherwise is going to be improved by help of the machine. That means you can do not just kind of more with less, but a lot more with a lot less time. So we fundamentally think that there are three categories of kind of growth drivers that come from that. One, John had mentioned, which is personalization. How can an enterprise treat their customers such that they'll be treated like VIP or their best customers? That's a very big deal. How can you deliver to them something so personal and so valuable just for them that there is a tremendous kind of growth that the company can see? The second one that's very important is automation. How can mundane processes be automated in such a way that the routine mistakes are not made? Because, if humans are touching it, we're making mistakes because we're human. That's kind of comes with it, right? So, but if we can program into the system this kind of process automation, we can drive tremendous productivity. And then last but not least, how can we augment decision making so that every decision is put in a context of almost the person making the decision being like a sommelier, whereby the best kind of wine experience are brought to you when you have to make that decision. We think all those three things are a very big deal, and all enterprises, whether you're somebody who's involved in a landscaping business somewhere in your region, or it's somebody that's involved in manufacturing, or somebody that's involved in providing plastic surgery. All these businesses have their peers, and a piece of technology we call peer intelligence that enables them to grade and benchmark where they are versus where somebody else can kind of go. So all of this together, I think, is going to bring tremendous value and productivity, and really boost all of our kind of value add going forward.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be a common theme across large enterprise businesses, regardless of vertical. They consistently have these giant data sets, their own historical data that they've been gathering for decades. It's oftentimes siloed across their enterprise, hard to connect the dots on, and it's impossible to actually unleash any sort of predictive insight from that data. And there are obviously plenty of services, including FatBrain, in the market, trying to streamline and actually make that data actionable for the operators. So it's great to hear. But turning to JP here, your company, again, HiSolutions, it seems to be kind of making sci-fi dreams come true by creating real-life smart homes. There will be 55 billion connected devices on Earth by 2025. So tell us a little bit about some of the capabilities that this IoT, this Internet of Things technology, can offer people these days.
Well, it's kind of scary because for most of us, all of those devices are like a big box of wires and products. The challenge, though, is to take all those technologies, which can be intimidating for most homeowners, unless you have like an 11-year-old gamer living in your home and can kind of figure it all out, is to actually start in a different place, start in a place away from the technology, and really understand what that homeowner wants to attain from their homes. Our homes have become kind of like an operating platform for our lives. It's much more than where we just go to seek shelter and eat and be with our family members. It's a place where oftentimes we're conducting business and receiving telemedicine. So these technologies can be very powerful. So we start in a different place. We want to understand the experience that the homeowner wants to attain, and then match the technologies and the services that bring that home. And that's a fundamentally different place than where this industry is today.
Great. So it's our opinion at GSV that failing to adopt, or actually flat out rejecting, AI technology is a bit like attempting to fight gravity. And I'd assume that in selling both to consumers or homeowners who are trying to update their own homes or selling to the enterprise, you're probably dealing with plenty of people who still think they want to pick this fight. Why do you think that is, and why has that been the case with changing technology over, I mean, centuries now, really?
I think largely it's an education gap. I think people don't really understand what's available to them, and they're probably disillusioned because, at least in our industry, what they have in their home often is just what the provider that came to see them sells, and what they know and what they install. So they're getting a very limited view of what actually is available to them, and that creates disillusionment, it creates frustration, and your expectations are quite low. So one of the opportunities we have is to bring that education to a whole different level, and make it not about the technology, make it about the experience. The technology enables the experience. It is not the experience.
When you have service people installing this in people's homes, is that a big element of your training? Do you have technicians who are able to educate people in their own homes on why these capabilities will actually change their daily lives and add a lot of value by streamlining the way they get up in the morning and what they come home to?
Sure. In fact, it starts with the discovery, right? That's where it starts, to really understand the customer. And then we may go into a design phase where we design the elements of the solution. And ultimately, that home should be something that just reacts naturally to the owner. And they can control it by, through voice, through touch, through motion, through timing. It reacts naturally, and so it's a seamless experience. And going back to the AI, the ability to personalize for each homeowner on kind of a mass customized way is a total game changer for us. Training, that's an opportunity we're going to have as we become a company of scale, and when we're getting there by acquiring companies from around the country. So, training and more kind of centralized, I hate the word centralization, but it's true in this case. More centralized training, giving people career paths where they're not just going to be a technician the rest of their lives, or if they love being a technician, they now are a technician delivering things with more purpose, to customers, so that gives more meaning to their work. But that's a big initiative that we have, is really bringing people up and giving them career paths.
Peter, I'd like you to jump in here too on the kind of B2B side. I'm sure there are some people who are begging for your technology and come inbound and can't wait to get their hands on it, and I would assume there are still some people who aren't quite sold, and like I said earlier, they want to pick the fight with gravity.
I think there's a famous quote by a jazz kind of musician, Thelonious Monk, simple ain't easy. And for many people, as soon as you complicate something, it becomes intimidating, and just like it used to be, still is for some, just to program a VCR, just to provide an homage, or a thermostat before Nest. It's complicated, it's intimidating. What's not is if you tell somebody, look, here's how somebody in your industry is doing, and here's what you could do to podium in this space. And oh, by the way, the only way you could learn this without using modern AI technology is to hire McKinsey, which you could never afford if you're running kind of a regional business. So that becomes a very interesting value proposition, which both demystifies and simplifies kind of our message to say, look, data can tell you something. It doesn't mean you have to follow it, but now you're better informed about how you can make a better decision and how you can win in a market and how you can kind of podium up. So we think those are the kind of things that we have to deal with. It's intimidating. Those things we don't know are always scary, right? And earlier what John said, there's a lot of talk about regulation, and some of the folks who are in the market, they want to provide regulation software, so there they are, speaking up regulation because they know that game. Elon Musk, just to be slightly controversial, that's kind of his game. But fundamentally what we think is a big deal is to explain, to show, to demonstrate, and really to prove how for a relatively small amount of money, somebody can be better informed, can decide really in a healthier, more kind of holistic way, and drive better business. That's kind of the simplest way we think about it.
100%. Okay, so this is a question for both of you as two veteran executives. I'll start with Peter, and I'll move on to John. So there's been lots of talk at this conference about the importance of authenticity for founders, for executives, for investors. And lots of companies have already been accused of simply slapping the AI tag onto their company name or their products in attempts to kind of squeeze in under this hot AI umbrella and just kind of force themselves in. But how can leaders actually keep their offerings moving at the rate or the pace of AI while staying true to their core?
I think the core, and by the way, veteran is another kind of euphemism for old, just so we're all clear. Gray hair, we qualify really well for that moniker. I think the important kind of setup for that is you have to run a good business, and a good business in whatever space you're in is going to be more productive, more innovative, more purposeful, and so on. And AI is going to help you the same way, a laptop helps you, or a mobile or a website helps you, right? It's a piece of technology that if you don't have, you're going to reach less people. You're going to be, you're going to have less happy customers and so on. So it's going to be that fundamental and that transformative. Imagine the world. 20-some years ago, John and I were working together in a company that was, really pioneering what you today know as QR code. Forget that it took a pandemic for all of us to really learn what a QR code is, okay? But we were doing this 20 years ago. I came back home and I told my wife the world's going to be different because I had just visited Japan and everybody was on their handset, literally not looking up, but walking down and looking at their handset. And I said, the world's going to be very different. Well, here it took us a long time to get there, but the impact is here today. It's the same. It's exactly the same with all these other kind of technologies. The technologies are going to be here. We just have to be there to meet them, to harness their power, and drive real value with purpose. To me, that's kind of the key takeaway.
Yeah, Peter, hence the gray hair. It took a lot longer than we thought, for sure. But no, we're purpose-driven entities, and you can't hide from your purpose. But at the same time, profit will expose you, right? So, if you're all about hot air, and you slap labels, your performance is going to lag. And technology and the leverage of technologies, the importance is critical for us to have increases in people's wealth. It comes from technology. It comes from productivity. In our unique case, the proof will be in the services that we develop, the additional revenue that it produces, the additional profitability that comes from doing that successfully, and all the people that we hire and we're able to expand because we're leveraging this technology in a very effective way. If we don't, then you're exposed. Just one curious about other pieces of advice. There are plenty of young people in attendance for this conference who are just starting out as entrepreneurs, as investors, as young leaders of their companies. And again, on the kind of pushback that you'll occasionally get, there's, are you faking it? And then there's also sometimes the question of, are you crazy? And you talked about you first were interested in AI in 1983. People who, and I would assume the same thing with the smart homes and IoT, these were kind of buzzy words that I first heard about probably 10, maybe 8 years ago, and nothing really happened. What kind of advice do you have for young founders to stick with it while there is that lag before there's the adoption that is occasionally driven by a massive event such as the release of ChatGPT where everyone says, oh, okay, and the light bulb goes off? How do you stay concentrated, focused, and persistent during that kind of period where the public has to catch up to what they think is your crazy idea? I get to go first this time. I think it's more art than science at the end of the day. Founders have a million challenges in front of them. And I'm sure a lot of folks in this room have started companies and been both successful and maybe failed in a few of them. It's not easy to manage all those variables. And the one thing that seems to be consistent across the board is the timeline that it actually takes, for what you see to materialize. You always feel like the window's going to close on you, right? So you rush, and then the market takes a little longer, to develop. So you've got to, you got to keep your eyes open. You've got to take advantage of other opportunistic ways to generate revenues while you're on that path to what ultimately is going to happen, so that you're there and a player when the real game actually begins. But I think it's more art than science.
Do you have a thought on that?
I think a lot of it has to do with luck. So, good old-fashioned luck, perspiration, a lot of perspiration, and a lot of what I call fast failures. Don't be afraid to fast fail, and it's okay. Fast fail, next. And I don't even say fail fast. I said fast fail. Use it as an adjective, right? And I think it'll all kind of work out if the core idea is there with a little bit of luck and a little bit of failure. There lies success. So that's been my experience anyway.
Michael Moe made a point similar to that in an earlier panel at the conference where he said, you want to learn from what happened, but once you've learned, there can't be a rearview mirror. And I think that applies to investments that haven't gone the right way, and same with entrepreneurial pursuits or startups that have ultimately fizzled out. So back to Peter, something you said to me this morning when we were chatting I thought was really interesting. And this is a direct quote. You said, some companies are Amazon-proof, but no companies are AI-proof. Can you say some more about that?
Well, what we're talking about was kind of the impact of AI. And, Amazon-proof simply mean if you just think of a car wash, Amazon is not going to be in a car wash business. So, it's great to kind of, build as many car washes as you want. They're not going to take your business away. But you're going to need AI if you run a really effective car wash. And that's the real big difference, right? Because they can Amazon can come and take your, bookstore away and, your food store away and so on, but they won't be able to take the car wash. But AI is something that's going to touch so many different areas so effectively and so much to the core. It's going to be much more like, imagine your life without a mobile phone today. 25 years ago, we didn't have them. We were pulling really long cord to try to talk to somebody if we wanted privacy, right? So it's just, my kids don't know that, but that was the deal. So that's a little bit of kind of how that world is going to be.
Yeah, speaking of Amazon, I remember back in the late 90s, when we were taking a lot of companies public, a lot of technology companies public, including internet companies. And in our prospectuses, we had discussions about the growth of e-commerce, how e-commerce would grow from 1996 to 2020. And everybody thought these projections were like wildly optimistic, right? And we all know what happened. We had a dot-com bust that happened a few years after that, and so many companies got washed out. But when you look back at the forecasts we made around online commerce and compared it to what actually happened, we were wildly pessimistic in our projections, right? And I see this as an analog for AI and machine learning. I think Peter, absolutely right. It's going to be pervasive in all of our lives. We need to be focused on how we leverage it to grow. In our industry, it's creating new services. We're not taking away jobs. It's not labor saving, but it's creating new opportunities for us. And I think that's where the future is, and people are able to do that will be the clear winners.
And just as a corollary to what John had said earlier, there's so much talk about regulating AI. Think how much we regulated internet. I just want to be clear, it was 0. And then we had a tremendous burst of creativity, productivity, and everything else. I'm not saying that there aren't risks, because with when iPhone became really popular, and Instagram and Facebook and everything else, and we had this motion of looking down rather than looking personal, all that is fraught with lots of risk. But if you think of all the positives where you could literally have every library in the world in your pocket at any time, anywhere in the world, wow. And that's so much more is coming with AI. That's what's exciting.
One quick follow-up just on something that John said. Having witnessed and been a part of and observed that .com era bubble, crash, hard crash, lots of garbage got sifted out, a lot of kind of fakers were exposed in the startup world. There have already been some comparisons with this massive generative AI tidal wave. There's so much capital flowing into these startups if they say the word generative AI in a pitch meeting. Again, what is your advice, or what is important if you're a young founder? What would you tell them to remember to avoid becoming that garbage that gets sifted out when things kind of settle down and the initial hype is reduced?
That's a hard one, but I would say in the 90s, to stay with that analogy, there were all these business models that got funded that didn't really have a model underneath it. It was hype, right? It was based upon craziness. And the companies that did survive that period, that did have solid business models, that Amazons of the world, won the game. So, Peter's probably better positioned because he's in the technology part of developing AI than I am. We're looking at it from applications. But from experience, as a young entrepreneur, if it doesn't make sense, it probably doesn't, right? And think twice and think long and hard about it. But companies with solid business models will win in this game.
I have very, very simple advice and maybe incredibly obvious. Every business has to be a business first. And to me, being a business first means selling something. So sell something, be a business, and everything else is going to be okay. So it's real simple, but it's like that. Everything else will add to that.
So the name of this panel is Man versus Machine, the mission movement in the age of AI. It's our position at GSV that the upcoming era will hopefully be defined as not man versus machine, but man and machine, and it'll be viewed as kind of augmentation rather than replacement. I think based on some of the comments you guys made right off the bat, I think both of you agree. However, and building upon that, how can this augmentation potentially help companies double down on their commitment to their mission-driven purpose?
Well, we think, and a number of people have said this, is that everybody wants to be part of something a little bit larger than themselves. I think it is a fundamental need that humanity has. We as a group want to belong. It's the longing we have to answer in our lives. And in that context, I think being something bigger as a community, from our perspective, comes with this idea of peer intelligence that I talked about, which is a big deal. And I illustrated it with the kind of the Waze kind of metaphor, where you have, look, if you put something into the bigger pot, you can be something bigger. It's smart and many that beat large and heavy, and we think that's kind of a big deal. And the mission of having this kind of a view on the world and insight of the world, we think is a very big deal. That's why we believe that our efforts are going to be focused in the middle of the pyramid. That's going to drive more prosperity for a larger proportion of the world as we kind of scale. And it's as simple or as complicated as that for us.
Yeah, I would just say also, from my perspective, we have a purpose, and the AI is going to drive our purpose further than it would be driven, without it. It's just that simple.
So, Peter, when we first spoke last week, you were calling in from Dubai. You had just gotten there from Abu Dhabi, and I know that you're constantly on the move in running FatBrain, running your company. Is there a varying perception across different regions in terms of the public sentiment towards AI? Is everyone in a similar state of awe, or does it really vary depending on where in the world you find yourself?
What I find in many parts of the world, which are, which I think are forward thinking, is they are very pro AI from kind of the top, the middle, and even at the core of the society, and maybe asking less questions about regulatory perspective and otherwise. So I think that's very interesting. So and it's a little bit different in Europe. Europe, there's a little bit more of a, hey, we're scared about what it's going to really mean. So it's protective from a jobs perspective and not appreciating kind of the productivity angle. It's definitely more forward thinking in South Asia and otherwise, because the challenges they have in all of that part of the world is, we have more people, how do we feed them more? How do we protect them more? How do we educate them better and in a personalized way? Provide better healthcare and so on. So I don't think we're as sophisticated in this country to start thinking about it from that perspective. Because the only thing government is saying is not how do we support it, or leave it alone. They're saying, how do we regulate it? So I think they should be kind of a little bit reversed like that. But I think overall people see tremendous opportunity, and there is that inflection point because they have seen something that they believe is powerful. Whether it's real or not, by the way, no judgment on ChatGPT and what it can and cannot do, but because they have seen something that's very promising, there is a tremendous tailwind now, and we're very excited about that.
Any thoughts there, John?
We're really not in the international markets right now, so I would just be giving you my personal opinion. But technology breaks down barriers, and in less developed parts of the world, technology provides opportunities for people to advance, and I think that's probably why you see less resistance than you do here in the States, and certainly in Europe, where people are much more parochial and protective.
So we've already talked a lot about the pace at which this technology is evolving. It's wild. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of generative AI tools being created pretty much daily. And what's kind of interesting right now is, from a technology perspective, in some ways it seems like upskilling a workforce or a population has never been easier because the tools are so accessible and a lot of them are so efficient. But at the same time, the technology is moving so rapidly that the need for that upskilling is so constant. How do you guys go about, whether it's with your employees or others, how does one effectively upskill a group in 2023 when things are moving at this breakneck speed?
We think it's kind of a part of a longer motivational cause. If you can hire curious people who are engaged and motivated, they'll always want to learn, in kind of a learning mode, right? And that's the way we look at it, and we just provide what we call in-place learning all the time. So there are new things come out, and then we want to motivate people to learn, and really push that learning to a customer base, push that into product base, and so on and so on. So that's the only way to do that. Enterprises, by definition, will take things on a little bit slower, because they have access controls and they want to make sure that nobody violates their policies and so on. But even enterprises have to, fail fast these days. Failing in terms of, new tools and otherwise, because just the pace of competition is lifted up. So I think it portends for a great era of learning in place and really learning at work the way you've never had to before. Which I think portends very well for the learning businesses that we all know about. So,
I'll answer in a second, but our gentleman has a question. He's had his hand up for a little bit.
I know we are in the Republican state and there are rules, but I hope we can ask questions here. So I'm a founder of Open Block Space, and we built the AI system for schools, and we also launched one for churches as well, right? And I have a question. You've seen recently probably Sam Altman Congress hearing, right? And he got a very good, strong position on leading this new agency potentially. So would you allow him to lead the agency, or whom you would pick up to lead this agency, which would regulate AI in the world? You spoke about internet actually, right? So that's what kind of related.
I think in terms of AI regulation today, less is more. and minimal is even better, and 0 in early stages even best, is kind of how I would think about it. That's not to say that we shouldn't understand what's going on or we shouldn't kind of unleash it. I'll give you a very simple example, which is really sad, but it's real. So for the last so many years, all sentencing in, like, criminal sentencing in the United States has been managed by an AI piece of software, which proved to be incredibly discriminatory, okay, and very biased. If you study it today, with the tools we know how to do today, it should not have been allowed to do what it did. But here it was. It was augmented decision-making. It presented things to the judges. Judges used it. Discriminatory outcomes, right? So the reason I give this as an example is there are many things we're all doing today that probably could be regulated when the outcomes are unfortunate. And this is unfortunate because it's people's lives and so on. I think to put a regulatory barrier at this early stage of kind of creativity and really kind of bigger space is not well placed. So Sam Altman is a very creative, incredibly thoughtful person. I wish he would spend more time, rather than being in charge of that regulatory agency, working on kind of what I call mini nuclear fusion. I don't know if, do people know about laser fusion? It's a great piece, the better advancement than last year, because we've had generative AI for 5 years, old hat. The bigger deal last year, 2022, was laser fusion, right? Because that promises real prosperity for a long time. So Sam, focus on that. Let regulatory stuff sleep for a while. We'll figure this out. That would be my counsel. John.
Yeah, I mean, you're in the front lines, right? I'm just looking to develop some applications, that make our business better and leverage AI. But Peter, you're on the front lines of it.
Right on cue there. I was just going to ask John. So you're doing these in-home, kind of make your home smart, upgrade your technology across anything that you interact with inside the doors of your residential home. I know your company does more than that too, which I'd welcome you to speak on. I wanted to hear a little bit about what we talked about earlier, some of the specific ways that you have recently started to integrate AI into the services of your business to streamline some of its existing operations.
Yeah, so I talked about this a little bit earlier. We're in the really early part of the game. We're in the first inning of this. So the first thing that we've done is we've integrated into the various network technologies that exist, in our world, and so we're able to monitor people's home networks and able to proactively repair them when they need to be repaired or rebooted. We've extended that into some other technologies, so we have visibility into what's happening. Where heretofore you'd have to wait for the customer to call you and say something's not working. My shades don't go down. My internet's terrible, and we'd have to go take their word for it, go out and troubleshoot. And the cause of that may have been a lot different than what the homeowner expected or what they shared with us. So it just brings productivity to a whole higher level, and at the end of the day, the homeowner has a much better experience with the technologies they have in their home. So that's the first inning. But there's a lot of personalization that will continue to happen, so that we can bring what our vision is, which is we call the autonomous home, so that it's on a mass customized basis across the country.
Pivoting to what was mentioned kind of in this question, there are many big, scary threats in the AI space that journalists certainly love. As was in Michael's keynote presentation, fear certainly sells, but there are plenty of threats that exist out there and that are causing people anxiety tied to AI, and these range from deep fakes to, of course, AGI, artificial general intelligence, to things on the kind of aerospace and defense front, like autonomous drone swarms. There are plenty of things that can keep you up at night and give you nightmares. But specifically, we'll start with Peter and then John. What are these specific elements that are keeping you up at night that really are worrisome to you?
I think bad actors I think of AI a little bit like a pair of scissors. You can tailor an amazing kind of piece of clothing with a pair of scissors. You kind of need them to cut things, or you can murder somebody. So with bad actors with scissors will murder somebody because they're bad actors. There have been tremendous, what I call industrialization of bad intent. This is defrauding people's, with credit cards, automated calling, annoying calling. This is stealing identities and so on, all done at that industrial scale. All that stuff is just going to get smarter and meaner and more nefarious because people are creative and bad people are sometimes more creative. So we'll have to be vigilant to protect against this. The good news is we have the technologies to do it, and we'll continue to do it. And there is actually a slew of technologies coming that are going to enable much easier representation of who is real and who is fake. And that's a big deal, we think. There's a tremendous movement in providing what we call behavioral signatures. If you're receiving packages at your house and you have an identity because you're receiving packages, it's very hard to fake receipt of packages to prove that you're real, because nobody's going to be sending fake packages to fake homes. It just doesn't work, doesn't scale. So there's a tremendous technological way to solve some of the bad stuff that's going to happen, but it is going to increase happening because we live in a in kind of a mean industrialized world. Not mean because it's industrialized, but mean because it's mean. That's just what it is. So we're here to stand up in front of it and protect us all.
I think that's really well said. I mean, from our perspective, our customers' homes are already vulnerable. Every place you've got an internet connection, you've got a vulnerability. So I think ultimately we're going to help people be more protective and more protected than they are today.
So to close on a slightly more hopeful and optimistic note than that question, so we talked earlier, we agree, GSV certainly agrees, there's going to be this unprecedented boost in productivity driven by AI. What use cases or opportunities are you most overjoyed or excited about that is, coming down the line here?
I think we've all heard of kind of the dream of personalized healthcare.
And sorry, we got about 60 seconds, so we'll make these brief.
Think personalized healthcare. Think personalized education. Think personalized business wellness. So we think there's going to be a whole category, and we're helping pioneering, where you can be coached for how to improve your business because it is your business in your driving area of whatever, 100 miles or so. We think that's a very big deal and very exciting so that your business can get the same kind of podium trajectory as the best run businesses in the world. So we're very, very excited about that.
Personalization and support.
Well said. All right, thank you guys very much.
Wait, there was a gentleman that had a question. We're happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, well, you guys can walk on up. We got to keep it moving in terms of the stage, but feel free to come up and you can ask us directly.